Good evening, everyone. We are now in chapter 7 of the book of Leviticus. It is the conclusion of the offerings. Chapters 1 to 7 actually is broken up into two parts. So, what we find is this: the first part is the, the sons of Israel, and the second part is Aaron and sons. Now, these are two categories that's been clearly delineated from chapters 1 to 6, verse 7. It is with regards to the sons of Israel, what from their perspective. And then from verse 8 of chapter 6 yesterday, all the way through chapter 7 today, it is for Aaron and sons. What you will find is that there are very particular laws or Torah with regards to how God wants things done in his house, God's rules. But the caretaker of God's rules is Aaron and sons, not the common folk. The common folk is told what they ought to do for their unintentional sins. For some of those menial sins, they are to deal with that because their character has been tarnished. But when it comes to the Kohanim, the priests, you will find that God is very severe with the priests. This describes to us that God is a fair God. God is a just God. He does not treat the common folk the same way he deals with the priesthood. The priesthood is a very special class of people taken from the Levites, whom God swapped out the firstborn. And then within the Levite group, we find that God had chosen Aaron and his sons to be the Kohanim, the priests. And Aaron begins as the chief priest or the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, which we may call. And the priests are the special holy people set aside for the purposes of ensuring all the rules in the house of God are maintained. And they have a very high responsibility, high expectations, as well as high judgmental severity. That is why God is fair. They are in the know. The general people are just knowing the general things. Now, we also alluded to the fact that when we read the text, we find that we see high level describe of the rituals. The details of the rituals are carried out from what we call the oral Torah. And it's passed down by tradition so that they know exactly what to do. And it's not written down in the text. Now, the second part here is what I want to highlight to you, which is Aaron and sons. With Aaron and sons, we have what we call the law of the priesthood. The laws of the priesthood or the Torah of the priesthood literally means that these are the regulations and the rules and the directions that must be adhered to, and it is not optional for the priesthood. Begins in verse 1 of chapter 7. It says, and this is the Torah of the Asham. This is the Asham, the trespass offering or the guilt offering. It is most holy. What does it mean? It is most special. Remember, the word holy is not a moral purity type of word, but it is special. Now, it's special because it has to be treated very differently from other things. And so the asham is most holy. And then it says in the place where they kill the olah, the olah needs to be killed at the entrance of the tabernacle. Then you will kill the asham as well. And so these are what we call the rules that is now being specified, and it is directed to Aaron and sons. And Aaron and sons needs to bear everything in mind. And the blood he shall sprinkle all around the altar. And so the question is, how is he going to collect the blood? In one basin? In what kind of a basin? Who is doing it? All of these are what we call details in the oral Torah. So, and he shall offer it from its fat. Now remember, in verse 3, the fat is chelef. We read in the earlier chapters of the book of Leviticus that all the fat belongs to God. The fat gives out the scent or the smell of appeasement. The fat tail and the fat that covers the innards, the two kidneys and the fat that is on them by the loins, and the fatty lobe that's attached to the liver above the kidneys, he shall remove, cut it out. So we have also spoken that this is not the fat that's intermingled with the muscles. So, and the priest shall burn them on the altar. Now, verse 5 carries on from previously. It's the idea here is to cause smoke to rise. So how do you cause smoke to rise? You set them in a fire, and the fire is set on the altar. And so the translation gives us shall burn them as a fire offering, which is an offering made by fire. And then we have this idea of an ishe. An ishe is when the offering is burnt up with the fire. Olah is a offering you bring out of free will so that you can have a better relationship with God. And it is burnt, and so it becomes an ishe when the fire licks it all, consumes it, and it's offered to Jehovah. Now, this in itself is an asham, a trespass offering. Now, watch. Every male among the priests may eat it, only the male, which means that these are Aaron's sons and the sons of these priests. And it shall be eaten in a special place. So every time you see the word holy, just replace by the word special. It is most special. And so treat it differently than other things that you eat. So be very careful with it. The asham is like the khatat. Now, this is the description. The asham is like the khatat. Because one is for errors and unintentional errors, one is for the guilt that one feels where the character is tainted by the mistakes he had made. And then God says, to be fair to everyone, there is one Torah for them both. So we're always talking about the Torah, and the plural is Torot. And so all of these laws are Torot Kohanim, the laws of the priesthood. It says here, the priest who makes atonement with it shall have it. Now, we may not be aware even now, there is a priest who will be responsible to conduct the atonement ritual for the asham and for the khatat. The trespass or guilt offering and the sin offering is conducted by a Kohen. And the Kohen who makes the covering, the atonement is a covering to cover the guilt and sin and debt. And when he finishes that ritual, he shall have it. So whatever is not burned is to be given to the priest, that particular priest that is conducting the ritual. And the priest is the one that is making atonement for the person who brings the asham. Next, and the priest who offers anyone's burnt offering olah, that priest shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering which he has offered. So if it was a sheep or a ram, or if it was a bull, well, you've got to skin the animal, and the skin of the animal is given to the priest. So it is important that the priest is rewarded for what he does for the people. When it comes to the mincha, where they use flour to offer, it says here in verse 9 that all the mincha, the grain offering, if it is baked in the oven, then you get a different texture and a different product. And all that is prepared in a covered pan, which is in a pot, or in an open pan, shall be the priest who offers it. So the priest gets a fair share of what is offered, and what is not offered to God is given as a contribution to the Kohen. Now, every grain offering, whether mixed with oil or dry, shall belong to all the sons of Aaron, to one as much as the other. Now, this whole idea is to make sure of the concept of fairness, that there is enough to go around for everyone, that they don't need to fight. The Kohen, remember, like the Levites, they don't have land. And so one part of it is from the tithe. The second part of it is from the offering. As the people brings the offering of the olah, the mincha, the shlamim, the chatat, and the asham, you find that whatever remains of it is given to the priest. With the exception of the shlamim, it's shared with the family of the offerer. But basically, you find that the offering as a tribute to God, the priesthood shares that. We come to verse 11. So we've dealt with the asham, we dealt with the chatat yesterday. And so this is the Torah of the sevak. The word sacrifice is sevak. Of the shlamim. The shlamim is a peace offering that is offered to God as a sacrifice for thanksgiving. He offers to Jehovah, and if he offers it for a thanksgiving, then he shall offer with the sacrifice of thanksgiving these things: the unleavened cakes mixed with oil, the unleavened flat wafers anointed with oil, rubbed with oil, the cakes which is bloated up of blended flour mixed with oil. And then besides the cakes as his offering, he shall offer another type of bread. Now this time it is leavened bread with the sevak of thanksgiving of his shalamim. So it is this shalamim that we're talking about. And from it, he shall offer one cake for each offering as a heave offering to God. Now, this word heave offering means a wave offering. There are a few offerings here, if you can see. We have one, unleavened cakes mixed with oil, two, unleavened flat wafers, three, cakes of blended flour, and then we have four, leavened bread. And so there are four types. So it's offer one from each offering as a wave offering, a heave offering to the Lord. So the idea here, it's not set to the fire, as you can see. In this case, it is waved before God. And so this is said to be a wave offering or a heave offering. The idea here really means to lift things up and move it from side to side. That's a heave offering or a wave offering. This is the way to symbolize a present to God. Now, when you go on, it says here that it shall belong to the priest after waving it, who sprinkles the blood of the peace offering. Now, the idea here of the peace offering is that there are animals that is there, uh, where it is also sacrificed. That's what sacrifice means. That's slaughtered, and he can offer his sacrifice of animal together with these cakes. So in verse 14, we're talking about one cake from each offering. And then there is the peace offering with the animal with the blood that is sprinkled. Now in verse 15, it says this: the flesh of the slaughter, the sacrifice of his shalamim for thanksgiving shall be eaten the same day it is offered. There is no keeping for the next day. So it's a rule, it's a law, right? He shall not leave any of it until morning. So when he says the same day it is offered, that same very day it's offered, it should be eaten. Now, if the sacrifice of his offering is a vow or voluntary offering, it shall be eaten the same day that he offers the sacrifice. Same thing. But on the next day, the remainder of it may also be eaten. So, what do you see? Some variations of when you can eat, depending on what kind of offering is being done. The remainder of the flesh of the sacrifice on the third day must be burned with fire to be destroyed. And if any of the flesh of the sacrifice of his peace offering is eaten on the third day, now remember, on the third day, it must be burned. If anyone eats it on the third day, then God says it shall not be accepted. So this is a violation. Nor shall it be imputed to him. It shall be a disgusting thing to him who offers it. And it annuls his peace offering or his shalamim. And the person who eats of it shall bear guilt. So what really does happen is if there is a violation, the priest will have caused a problem. And the problem caused will also affect the person who brings it. And it annuls it, it invalidates it. It's been contaminated. There is no acceptance of the shalamim. Now, God is fair. Why? God's house, God's rules. When it is brought to God, the priest of all people must realize and respect the fact that God is God and man is man. You cannot be casual about anything in the house of God. This is to let us know that God's house is special. It is holy. It is be dealt with in a holy way, in a special way, in a careful way, different from all other places. Which means this: if there is a violation, there will be a penalty, there will be a consequence, and that particular offering is no longer accepted. In verse 19, another violation or non-compliance is this: the flesh that touches anything unclean. Remember, clean and unclean are rules that God made. And so they know. So who would know what is clean and unclean? The priests. The people may not know everything, but the priest is the person, the go-to person to know all these things. So the burden to carry and honor all the rules of clean and unclean comes with the Kohanim. So it says the flesh that touches anything unclean shall not be eaten. Very simple. When it is unclean, don't touch, much less eat. It shall be burned with fire, which is the standard way of destroying anything that is contaminated. As for the flesh, assuming it's clean, then all who are clean may eat of it. Now, there are times when even the priest can become unclean. He may have walked onto a graveyard. He may have touched a carcass, and it makes him unclean until he cleans himself. And so while he is unclean, he has no part of what is being done. And so he would not be doing the atoning rituals, and he can't share from whatever is shared. But the person who eats the flesh of the sacrifice of the peace offering, the sevak of the shlamim, that belongs to God while he is unclean. And this is the severity of God, where towards the Kohanim, this is the Torah. Do not violate, particularly the priest. That person shall be cut off from his people. Now, please remember, this idea is very severe. It is to tell us that it is very severe. God is not a God that goes around cutting off people. But when it comes to his house, his rules must be kept. Like in today's environment, if you go into the palace of a king, you must observe all the protocols. Protocols are rules. Much more than if you were to approach God in the temple or the tabernacle. You cannot be casual. And so God says, those of you who are charged, you better do it right. Because if you don't, then that unclean person shall be cut off from his people, which means that there is a death penalty that is associated from a casualness treating God. So all the Kohanim must be very serious. They can't fool around. They can't joke about this. They have to make sure that everything is prim and proper. And so all the details that comes from the oral Torah must be adhered to by the Kohanim, the priesthood. They are the ones that God looks at to make sure that everything is prim and proper. Moreover, the person who touches anything unclean. What are unclean things? And later we'll see more of this. As human uncleanness or discharge, male or female, unclean animal. There will be classes of animals that is considered unclean. In fact, most of the animals. Any abominable, unclean thing which you're not supposed to touch. In verse 21, and who eats the flesh of the shalamim that belongs to God, when you are unclean, that person shall be cut off from his people. This is basically an expansion. It is to tell us that God's house, God's rules. And in this case, God's rules are very severe. This is directed to the Kohanim. We continue on in verse 22. Verse 22 says, and then, now after these things, it's given in categories. And then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, now you speak to the children of Israel, the sons of Israel. This is now to this group of people, saying this. There is a rule. You shall not eat any fat. And in verse 22 and 23, this word fat is chelev. It belongs to God. It is spoken of in chapters 1, 2, and 3 of ox or sheep or goat. These are the big animals. These are the smaller animals. And the fat of an animal that dies and the fat that is torn by wild beasts may be used in any other way, but you shall not eat it. Now, these are rules. This will come later on when we describe the clean and unclean animals. This is given with the understanding that the clean and unclean animals were already known by the time these words are penned. So, what we see is this: the fat of an animal that dies naturally. What does that mean? This is not slaughtered. If it's not slaughtered, you can't eat. If it is torn by wild beasts, meaning it is a roadkill, it is killed by others, by animals, it is also not slaughtered. But don't waste it. So God is saying, you shall by no means eat it. Don't eat it, but it can be used in other way, for other things, but not for an offering. So it says here very clearly, for whoever eats the fat of the animal which men offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, this is an ishe. The ishe burns all the chelev that is used for the offering and is for God. And so no one shall eat it, not even the priests. And if you do, then the person who eats it will be cut off from his people. So this is also a very severe rule. God's rules. When God is saying, when you come to me, when you approach me, and when you bring a korban, when you bring an offering, a zevach of an animal, it must be perfect. So it must be slaughtered there at the entrance of the tabernacle or the temple. But if it's dead in any other way, don't bring it to the temple. And so if you have brought it to the temple, it's offered, the chelev, the fat, does not belong to you, it belongs to God. So moreover, you shall not eat any blood, and so we'll talk about this, in any of your dwellings of bird or beast. Whoever eats blood, that person shall be cut off from his people. Another severe law. So let's deal with this. Verse 26. We have two words here: eat and blood. First, we deal with blood. The word blood is dam. That's what it's pronounced, dam. And so when you have this word Adam, Adam is a person, a human being, is a humankind, is a human that has blood. It is reddish. And that's where the red comes from, the blood. So blood is dam. But the word eat, it is important for us to appreciate the word eat is okla, okal, or akal. That would be a better way to say akal. And this is what I want us to understand. Akal means you eat and it goes into the mouth. And it goes down the digestives. And it is digested. And then you get the effect of being full. This is the concept, the imagery of akal. It comes from the word kol, which means everything filled up, satisfied. So when you eat and you feel good and satisfied, that's eating. And so the concept of do not eat any blood literally means you don't take the blood in any form, put it in your mouth, and then it goes down your digestive tubes into the stomach and you feel full. So it doesn't matter whether it's coagulated or whether it's in liquid form. It's just a no no, complete no no. No eating of blood in any form. So the eating is not to, in case you bite your tongue and you happen to swallow some of your blood. That is not eating. So the concept of eating is about into the mouth, into the digestive tracts of your tract, your esophagus, and into your stomach, and it's digested, and you feel full, which means that blood transfusion doesn't fall into this category. So the Hebrew is actually quite explicit in defining. And so the Bible doesn't care in what form and shape the blood is. It's just no blood to be eaten, whether bird or beast. And if that person eats any blood, he shall be cut off. And so we see a very severe, these are all severe rules. There is a cutting off. Now, it's not that the people of Israel is just going around watching to see who to cut off. The idea of the thing cut off here is to tell you that this is a very serious law, and please pay attention. Just like the laws of this land, if you happen to traffic drugs, there is a death penalty. And the reason why it is accorded the death penalty is that it wants to induce a particular attitude and behavior. That if this is such a severe law that you can lose your life, you better be extremely careful to comply. That is what these mean. That all these cutting off is not about God going around telling people that he's going to destroy them. It is to tell people that it is a very severe law. Pay close attention and do it properly. Verse 28. Verse 28 is another section. It says, then, it literally means, and then. God spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, again to the general population, and warn them these words. He who offers the tzevach of his shalamim to God shall bring his korban. In verse 28, he shall bring his korban to God. And so we have this sevak of his shalamim to the Lord. and bring his offering, which is the korban, to Jehovah from the tzevach of his peace offering. Means this: if you are making an offering, you must make sure that you follow the rules of the peace offering. His own hands shall bring the offerings made by fire to the Lord. Notice this is the offerings made by fire is ishe. It does not mean that this person is doing the offerings made by fire or the ishe. It's the Kohen that does that. But he must bring it with his own hands. He is not to ask somebody else to bring it. Now, what is the importance of this to the general population? It is to tell them that when you come to approach God, when you come to see God, you must have the right attitude that you really want to meet God. Doesn't matter whether you're rich, that you have servants. You are, it's between you and God. It's not you and your servants and God. And so all of these that is being described is the relationship between a person and God. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. And so God insists you have to come by yourself with your own hands. The chelef of the breast he shall bring of the animal, that the breast may be waved as a wave offering before God. Now, after that, in verse 31, and the priest shall cause the smoke to rise of the fat on the altar. So the burning here is about the chelef, but the meat shall be Aaron's and his sons. And so when they come and bring the animal, the fat and the breast is given to the priest. Then the right thigh, it's always the right thigh, and it has to do with Jacob's struggle with the man in the wrestling match. You shall give to the priest as a heave offering from the sacrifices of your peace offerings. Meaning, all these, the animal that you bring, you have to cut it up. You have the breast, you have the thigh, and he among the sons of Aaron who offers the blood of the peace offering and the fat that he burns, he shall have the right thigh for his part. So it's about the distribution, which means that in a peace offering, a shlamim, we need to remember when you go back and read chapter 3, the shlamim has a part that's offered to God, which is the fat. And the rest is shared between the offerer, the person who offers, and the priest. Now, in chapter 7, there is a bit more clarity as to which part goes to who. The breast of the wave offering and the thigh of the heave offering, God says, I have taken from the children of Israel. Meaning, the sons of Israel cannot take them. They bring the savat of the shalamim, and God says, I have given them to Aaron, the priest, and to his sons from the children of Israel as a statute forever. And each time you read this hok or lam, it means it is a serious law that is to be kept for a long time. This is not to be trifled with. You cannot say, well, maybe this time I'll keep the breast. No, no. It is a law and it's God's law. And notice, these laws are very specific and it's very serious. Verse 35. Verse 35 says, this is the consecrated portion, or this is the contribution. This is a contribution for Aaron and sons from the Ishe, right? Offerings made by fire on the day when Moses presented them to minister to the Lord as Kohen. They are set apart. They should get a portion of what is given, and God would take it from the sons of Israel and assign it to the priests. Jehovah commanded that this is to be given to them by the children of Israel. The sons of Israel cannot take the breast and the right thigh. Because the priest is set apart, they are holy and they are anointed. Verse 36, where it says that they are anointed, they are mashak. Mashak means they have oil poured over the head or oil rubbed over them as a symbol that they are specially indicated to be set apart for God. They are holy, they are special. And it is by a statute forever throughout their generations. As long as they are Israelites, as long as they are priests, there will always be the Kohanim, the priesthood, and they will continue to receive such portions of their shalamim, the breast and the right thigh. What happens to the rest of the portions minus the fat? Well, it's given to the offerer to take home to be shared with the family. We come to the last part of chapter 7. It says in verse 37, this is the Torah of the Olah. So notice this is an Olah. This is the Mincha. This is the Chatat. This is the Asham. These are the consecrations. Now, the idea of consecrations is the installation of the high priest, which we saw yesterday. This is the Sevak of the Shalamim, which the Lord commanded Moses on Mount Sinai. So it was given a long time ago, but written down in the book of Leviticus. So we have the Olah, we have the Mincha, we have the Chatat, we have the Asham, and then we have the Shalamim. And this is told to us that it was on Mount Sinai that which Moses spent a lot of time and God gave it as a law. And then it is described now in the book of Leviticus as it's separated out as the laws to the priests. On the day when he commanded the children of Israel to offer their offerings to the Lord in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. The offerings were given after the tabernacle was completed and set up. And that would be at the end of the first year after they left Egypt. And so up till chapter 7, it has to do with all the offerings. The Olah, the Mincha, the Shlamim, the Chatat, and the Asham. Right here, burnt offering, grain offering, sin offering, trespass offering, the sacrifice of the peace offering, and here the consecrations of the high priest. And it is commanded, and this is a word which we seldom talk about. It is ordered. God ordered Moses to order the sons of Israel to do their korban. When you come to God in the tabernacle and the temple, you bring a korban, a gift, a tribute, but there are different kinds of tribute for different reasons. And it's clearly stipulated in high level, chapters 1 to 7 of the book of Leviticus. And the details are carried down by tradition in the oral Torah. And so we have now come to the end of chapter 7, and we have completed 7 chapters with regards to the korban, that it is God's house, God's rules. There are rules that must be followed, and it is to demonstrate that people must be serious with God. The priest even more careful with God, and God insists that certain violations will be cut off, is to make sure the people and the priests carry an attitude that this is severe, this is serious. God says there is no fooling around. Pay attention. Make very clear that you are doing all this because it carries a death penalty. It is to enforce an attitude to realize who God is. You are coming to God's house, and so God's rules must be complied. It is not your house. It is not outside there in the open environment. And so, specific garments, specific rituals, specific sacrifices, specific offerings for specific reasons must be complied. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.